Hello, Garland Nixon here. And as all wars eventually end up, this one will come to some kind of an end. Will it be negotiated? Will it simply be brute force? Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here, and we are going to talk about the end. How does this thing end? That's the big question. That's the big fear. How does it end? We know what's going on, we know what's happening, etc. But how does it all end? The fear, of course. The number one fear is that it ends in some kind of a nuclear catastrophe, some kind of a nuclear conflict, and we're all dead. And let's face it, the reality is that's the fear of humans. That's the fear. That's the acceptance of mortality to say, what is it going to take me out? I know I'm out of here at some point, but I ain't in no rush. As my mother used to say, my mother, unlike me, was a very religious woman, and she'd say, one of these days, the good Lord's going to call me home, but I ain't homesick. And I think that is the position of most people. One of these days I'm out of here, but I'm trying to push it off in the distance as quickly as possible. So as a result, we are always looking for things that would cause us danger, right? I mean, you're sitting in a car, you're sitting in a house, whatever. What we call our consciousness is a scanning system that's scanning for threats, right? That we call that our consciousness. I would argue there's a lot more to our consciousness than just that temporary little scanning mechanism that's always looking for threats or food or sex or whatever it is that drives our species to continue. But it is realistic to understand, it is realistic to evaluate this particular crisis from the perspective of that fear. So put those two things together. How does it end is coupled with everyone's fear that we're going to die, our kids are going to die, we're all going to die long before what we would consider our time. Okay. Well, let's start with this. There are any number of problem solving models that you can teach or learn about, but they all start off with the same thing, right? Number one, and one of them is actually one of the problem solving models is actually define the problem, and it starts with it's an acronym, and each letter is a D is has a meaning, and you can go through it. But the D in define starts with define the problem. Let's do that. Let's talk about what are we looking at here? What's going on? What is happening here? It's an easy one. I'll put it to you like this. If you look at the US empire, what has the US empire been doing for the past umpteen, I don't know how many years, let's just say since, World War II. Start there. Overthrowing governments to control, overthrowing governments, regime operations, working to control governments, working to control the levers of power around the world, right? You got a government, either one of two things. The US empire sees two types of countries that it has taken control of, countries that it has bases in and they do what they're told and things of that nature, and countries that they intend to take control of, right? Not countries that they control and countries that they don't control, not countries that they have turned into colonies and countries that they haven't turned into colonies. That wouldn't be as bad. That wouldn't be as malicious as the actuality of the US empire. In reality, it's this. There are countries that they have conquered. Let's go back to old school language, old feudal language, right? The US empire sees countries that they have conquered and countries that they intend to conquer, not countries that they haven't conquered, countries that they intend to conquer. Any country that is deemed unconquered, it's uncivilized, it hasn't been brought into the fold of the US empire. It is not going to feed the US empire, right? Any country like that must be conquered. And that country is now put on the list. You're on the shit list. You got to get conquered. And we have to take any kind of action that we can to conquer you. Now, if you look at what happened, say in the early 2000s, they got happy. After the original Iraq invasion and the attack on Iraq, they didn't invade Iraq itself. After that, they in 91 they got froggy and they started feeling like, man, nobody can stop us. Our military is so powerful. But keep in mind, they were up against a military that was not armed, that was not a peer military. So they got happy. Oh, look at what we can do. We can do anything we want. So then comes 2000, the Bush administration, and you'll probably remember this. General Wesley Clark said he went to the Pentagon and somebody said, we got 7 countries that we want to overthrow. Buddy, that's Nazi Germany right there. We got a whole group of countries. And here's what's interesting on them. They all happen to be in the Middle East. And what's there? Oil. What's there? Oil. What they were really saying, we want to conquer Syria. We want to overthrow Libya. We want to overthrow Iran. We want all of that was we're going to control the resources of the world. See, there's 2 ways you can do it if you aspire to run the world. You can overthrow one country at a time, right? Okay, we're going to get Poland, and then on we go to France, and you name it, right? And eventually we'll move on. The Soviet Union, you know, that's the way Hitler did it. Or you can do a different way. You can say, we don't want to go head to head with all these countries, so here's what we're going to do. Everybody needs oil. We're going to get full control of the Middle East, and we will have the levers of power. And now we can say to all countries in the world, do what we want, or you don't get oil. That's what that was about. Get the overthrow of the 7. People think that the Middle East is about Israel. It is not. You got it backwards. The Middle East is not about doing Israel's bidding. The Middle East is not about doing what you can for Israel. Israel is about controlling the Middle East. Israel is as it's been said, the U.S.'s unsinkable aircraft carrier. They've said it about Israel. They've said it about Taiwan. It's been implied about Ukraine, right? It's the same thing. I want power in the Middle East. So what I need is a base where I got lots of military, I got lots of power, military power, and all I need. And I can say to Israel at any time I'm attacking country X, I need you to be in. Meanwhile, you can run all kinds of Mossad and CIA operations. You can do all these things throughout the Middle East, and Israel is there. It's an aircraft carrier. It is a fort. It is a base in the Middle East, a base of military operations for the United States. So don't fool yourself into thinking that the United States is there for Israel. Israel's there for the United States. And they'll put up with whatever shit they got to put up with from Israel. They don't care. They'll let Israel do whatever they want, because what they're getting out of it is a base of operations for the Middle East so that they can control. The idea was we want to control all the oil. And their plan was to have vassals, to have all of the countries around there. Either they use, and here's the way it worked. The Sunni countries tended to say, okay, we've got leaders that will go along with the U.S. empire, so they fall right in line. The Shiite companies tend to be more, first of all, lean towards more like socialism, that the U.S. wouldn't lead more in that direction. And the Shia countries tended to want to be more independent and say, we're not falling in line. So the U.S. was really, when you look at it, they were at war with the Shia countries, and they were going after Libya, again, independence, right? And all this is important for me to get to where I'm getting in Ukraine. So don't think I'm getting sidetracked. I'm actually going somewhere with this. Okay. So what's happening is the U.S. is in the Middle East working to control things. So what are they doing? They're doing regime change operations, right? At the time, 2000, they go into Iraq and they do a physical, kinetic regime change operation. They said, let's see what it's like if we do the easy. If we do it, what we want to do is the easy way. We're not going to go through all these color revolutions and illusions and crap like that. We're just going to send a bunch of troops in there, bare-handed, bare-knuckled brute force, right? Just knuckle dragging. We got bigger, more bombs than you do, and we're going to take what you got. That's what Iraq was about. But they ran into some problems. Number one, because, they owned Iraq and it became very problematic for them, and they were stuck there. Politically, they took a beating in 2006. The neocons didn't like that. And and the body bags coming home. Oh, people didn't like that. So they decided we got to do regime changes in another way. But it was the same thing. How do we rule the world? That's what this is all about. And at that, the Middle East was about, if we control the oil, we can force everybody else to do what we want. Again, another reason that Russia's problematic and Venezuela's problematic, because there are alternative options. That Iran's problematic because there are alternative options for energy for other people, and those are outside of the U.S.'s sphere of influence. Problematic. They got to be dealt with. Okay, why do I get into all of that before I get to Ukraine? Why do I get into all of that? because what we're talking about was what? Regime change operations. We have an independent country, and we have to do something to get rid of that independence. We want control of them. We are the Borg. Resistance is futile. And so you might as well understand the United States is going to control everything in the world. So off we go to do it. Okay. Regime change operations. Now, I've noticed something that you may think about. In recent years, regime change operations ain't what they used to be, are they? And it's not an accident. So what happens? The US is like, well, we overthrow this country, that. So they overthrow Libya, ha, 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 boom. So they get it in their mind, Syria's next. So Syria's next. They're going to overthrow Syria. Yay. And we're going to take everything they got and then we'll control Syria. That's another area of operation. We can use that for whatever, right? Okay. When they go to overthrow Syria, they got a problem. The problem is the rise of other superpowers. Russia is now militarily and politically strong enough to assist their allies. So Russia then says, number one, we got a base there that we've had since the 70s, and what is it, Tartar, Saris, whatever it is. They got a Navy base. They ain't giving that up. So we say, nope, here's what we're going to do. Russia sends in some aircraft, military advisors, a small amount of soldiers, things of that nature. And they go in there and they say, we're going to give Syria enough horsepower to hold off this U.S. Western attempt to overthrow the government. It's not going to happen. Plus, Russia looked at it and they said, we got enough problems with ISIS, Al Qaeda, the rest of these maggots. We're not going to let them have another country to build in. So Russia goes in. Think about this. They've been overthrowing countries. Nobody was strong enough to do anything. Russia puts military in. Russia says, we're going to stop this. The U.S. couldn't come out and say, we're doing it, and Russia's trying to stop them. They had to claim innocence. Oh, well, we don't. It seems to be organic and blah, blah, blah. Russia said, yeah, it seems to be organic. Wham, we're swatting it. So they go to overthrow Syria, and now there's a new dynamic. There's a new sheriff in town, and his name's Reggie Hammond Putin. And Putin says, nope, not this time. So another superpower steps in and thwarts their color revolution. The world at that point has changed. The world has taken a turn. There's somebody in town that can do something to address or stop your color revolution, right? Now, what else do? They go to Ukraine, they do that, right? But there's been other attempts. Venezuela. So they decide there was a couple of futile and absurd attempts. And I'll get into why they're so futile and absurd. But in Venezuela, one thing is they try to fly some drones in or something and blow up Maduro. He's giving a speech at a stadium or something. They try to fly these drones in and blow them up. The Venezuelans shoot the drones down. So that doesn't work. Then, of all things, and then the preposterous stuff starts. Then, and as I said, I'm getting to Ukraine here. It's important that I give this background before I get to what's happening in Ukraine. So be patient with me. Please be patient with me. So, because background is important. It's very important here. So another thing they do is, Juan Guaido goes out screaming on the street with a microphone. It's time to overthrow the government, and stands in front of an Air Force base and just like expects the government to fall. And he looks around and everybody goes home. Then they do the famous Bay of Piglets, where they send like these 60 mercenaries and they put them on boats and they go there. The idea is 60 mercenaries, or 60 or 90, whatever it was. They're going to come onto the Venezuela coast in fast boats, jump off. Somehow, you got to love this. Somehow they're going to make their way to the capital. Somehow they're going to get to Maduro, to his place. They're going to kidnap and or kill him. And there you go. Imagine that. Imagine an entire country of 30 million people, and you're like, hey, I got a great idea. We'll send 60 people there that'll somehow magically make it to the capital and kill the guy in charge. Talk about stupid and boneheaded. Needless to say, what happened to stupid and boneheaded people? Having been to Venezuela, I can tell you this about Venezuela. They've got a volunteer force of millions and millions and millions of people, literally millions of people, right? And these people, they wear the brown military uniforms, and it's pretty much everybody. Simple as that. Pretty much everybody, all these billions of people, they got guns. So if there's a problem, they can be part. That's one of the reasons the US cannot invade. Can you imagine? You invade this country and there's the military and there's millions of armed people with AK-47s all over the country. You can't go anywhere that they ain't going to, you can't ride in a country town somewhere. They're going to open up on your ass and fill you full of holes, right? So Venezuela is a tough nut to crack. That's why they haven't invaded it. But at any rate, so they try this. Well, here's an example of what happened. There's a bunch of fishermen and they're like, hey, who are these schmucks? They go home, they get their government issued AKs, and they light their asses up. They lit them up. Fishermen. Now, think about this. Think about this. The United States sends these so-called heavily armed mercenaries to overthrow the country, and they get lit up by a bunch of fishermen. The guys are like, hey, what are you doing? Catching fish. Yeah, looks like some mercenaries. Give me my gun. Yeah. They shoot a bunch of the mercenaries. I think they got about 20 of them that they grabbed, and I think the rest of them got filled full of holes, right? Why do I say that? What kind of an idiot would think that that's a good idea? Here's my whole point. That's where how about Kazakhstan? Something happens in Kazakhstan, God only knows what. They start a little bit of there's some protest or something. The US then tries to pump in arms and tries to turn the protest violent, right? And remember what happened? Russia sent in a bunch of troops. Said, this ain't happening. And what they did was interesting. They sent the troops in. The troops stabilized the basic things in the town and let the Kazakhstan troops go out and put down this so-called color revolution that the US was behind. So bottom line is, and they tried in Belarus. You remember that? Lukashenko was a guy who was kind of between the West and the East. And then the West decided, well, he ain't going to be between either one. They tried to overthrow the government and assassinate Lukashenko. Lukashenko says, I've made my decision. I'm going with the East. So he becomes tied at the hip with Putin. His government, his economy and all, they're now tied at the hip with Putin, which means they're going to have gas this winter, for one thing. But at any rate, and that falls apart. Why have I gone through all of that stuff? Why did I have all that to say? Here's why. What is going on in Ukraine right now? What really is it? Let's define it. It is a regime change operation for Russia. That's what it is, plain and simple. If you narrow it down, it is a regime change operation aimed at Russia. Do you remember what they said at the beginning? Well, of course, well, Russia's done this. And what did Joe Biden say? This man can't stay in office. That's a hint. And then they said, we will wipe out Russia's economy within weeks. The ruble will be rubble, and then the Russians will rise up and overthrow Putin, and boom. And that made as much sense as the Bay of Piglets. It would work as well as the Bay of Piglets. You might as well send 60 mercenaries across the border to somehow make their way to the Kremlin and kidnap or kill Putin. It would have been just as effective. So what is it? It's simple. Very simple. They've told you what it is. This man must not stay in office. Isn't that what Biden said? That means they are running a regime change operation. And because these people are stupid and incompetent, it ain't going to work. However, here's the problem for the West, for the Biden people, for the neocons. There's one thing when you're trying to do a regime change operation in Sheboygan, right? All you got to do is like manipulate the government, get a new mayor in, get the city council in. There's like 11 people in Sheboygan, piece of cake, because the only residents there are, in fact, the governor. I mean, the mayor and the city. I'm being all jokes aside here. Sheboygan's a nice little town, but you get my point. If you're trying to overthrow a tiny government, then it ain't going to be that hard if you're powerful. If you're trying to overthrow one of the most powerful countries on earth, it ain't going to be easy. And your stupid, idiotic little Bay of Piglets attempt ain't going to work. But there's something far worse. It's doomed to backfire on you because now you're dealing with somebody with real horsepower. So here's my point. A couple of questions that people have. And that is, and this is the big one for all of us, right? Big one. This is the big one, right? And here's the one. Do we get out of it alive? Isn't that always the question? When whatever you do, some guy says, hey, let's take a ride out to the store. And you look at him, you're like, you're drunk as hell. No, I can get in the car with you. They're like, why? Because the question is, do I get out of this alive? If I get in the car with this guy and he's plastered, I might not get out of it alive. So the question always becomes, am I going to get out of this alive? So that's the question for human beings. It's constantly there, right? It's about survival. So the question is, do we get out of this alive? I think we do. Most of us, not everybody. Well, no, first of all, everybody's going to die of something. So not everybody's going to get out alive ever, including me. But as far as do we all die in some kind of godforsaken nuclear holocaust or World War III? Here's what I think. If the West, why do I say the West? Let's be honest, the U.S. empire, there ain't no West. When all of the vassals do the bidding of one, then why do you pretend as though there's some gigantic array of countries who are all working together? That's absurd. This is about the U.S. empire and its colonies and its vassals, right? So the U.S. empire and its colonies and its vassals, they decide we're going to take out Russia. Okay, now they've gone from we're going to the little guys who don't have much power, blah, 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 to the big guys. And we're going to confront them. And the plan was pretty clear. They overthrow, and we know all of these things we know can be documented now. They overthrow the government of Ukraine on Russia's border. They make a deal called the Minsk Agreement. We now know it was by one of the people who was involved, Petro Poroshenko, who says, no, that was only, again, regime change. This is a bigger country, so they got a long-term regime change operation, right? The Minsk Accords was to hold the Russians off until such time as we can build our military enough to go head-to-head with the Russians, which would be a lot longer than any of us will ever live, like 1 trillion years, because they ain't going head-to-head with the Russian military. But that's beside the point. We'll get to all of that. Okay, so what happens is they sign the Minsk Accord. They start building a building, heading for the war with Russia. They're planning on a war with Russia. And the U.S.'s plan is it's problematic. We don't want to go toe-to-toe with Russia because our people at home are not even prepared for the kind of losses that we'll take, and neither are we. And it could end up with all of us dead. And the neocons they don't want to die, right? So they got a devious plot that they just know it's going to work. They're going to set up Ukraine. They're going to fatten that goose up until Christmas time. When Christmas comes, they're going to serve Ukraine up. Now, they felt as though I think because they're so deluded in their mind, they felt that Ukraine may be able to build up the Ukrainian army enough to hold off the Russians, right, and hurt the Russians. They didn't have to win because they knew it wasn't going to needed to be done long, right? So they're like this: we'll set the Ukrainians up. The Russians will pour into Ukraine. We'll drag this on as long as we can. I mean, read the 2019 RAND report; it's obvious, right, and the excerpts from it. Clear what they were going to do: drag Ukraine into this war. Russia into a war with Ukraine, and that's where the trap was sprung. Right? Ukraine was the cheese in the trap. We get them in there, then we can do our true regime change operation. The true regime change operation is to get their vassals and colonies together to hurt Russia so bad economically with sanctions that, of course, and as you know, the absurdity, it falls apart and the people say, oh, no, we can't take it. We got to overthrow Putin. And they all fall on Putin and tear him to shreds. And they give him the Libyan Gaddafi. They sodomize him with a rifle beret or whatever the hell. And then Joe Biden cackles and says, we came, we saw, he died. Boom, they're done. And now they're in good shape because they've got Russia. They have the natural resources to rebuild a fading empire, an empire that's fallen apart. They now got the natural resources to rebuild, and they have the natural resources to control China, control India, control everybody. You got Russia. It makes sense that they would get Russia first because Russia has the natural resources in the same way that they wanted to control the Middle East. Because if you control the Middle East, you control the oil, and now you tell everybody, do what I tell you, you don't get oil. Now you get Russia, you got a lot of oil. You got the U.S.'s oil and Russia's oil. And of course, in their little plan, they overthrow Venezuela and Iran, and they got all that oil too. So it's a different way of controlling the world through controlling the natural resources. They got Russia, okay, they're in business, right? That was the plan, albeit a few holes in that plan, but that was the plan. Okay, so what happens? They begin their plan. Boom. We're gonna I would argue that when the latest iteration of the war has been going on since 2014. But what happens? In February, they then instruct and if you've been paying attention, you already understand this. Then instruct their proxies in Ukraine to start shelling Donbass, shelling, lots more shelling. Well, the Nazis are there and they're like, yay, we get to shell Donbass. We get to shell Donbass. Of course, they're absurd, insane ideologues. So they truly believe in their hearts, they've been told, no doubt, that there's a war will be provoked with Russia, this cathartic war. And then the US and the West will join them and they will defeat Russia on the battlefield. And then Ukraine will gain its power and the white race, all the stuff that the Nazis believe. They're there to, like all white people on earth somehow decided that these ignorant bastards were the ones that they're going to lead us. Yes, we must protect the white race. That's the Azov battalion. And I'm thinking, I don't remember the white race having a vote saying, hey, the bunch of friggin' meat-headed knuckle-dragging apes with swastikas on. Yeah, that's who we want to lead us. I don't remember that vote. So I'm thinking the rest of the white race probably wasn't crazy about the Azov being there leading and saving the white race. But in their twisted ideology, that was the plan. They pick up a war with Russia. In comes the West. And there goes, and I guess some kind of way, it's almost laughable to think about it. These dumb bastards believed that the West was going to give them power. They're going to fight, and they're going to fight the Ruskies, and then they're going to win. And then the West is going to say, Ukrainian Azov Nazis, all along, we thought you guys would be great leaders. And they're going to do the arm thing, and they're going to Sieg Heil, and they're going to goose step, and we're going to goose step into a new world of goose stepping Nazis, and Stepan Bandera will be our leader, and I guess whatever, right? Which little do they know that wasn't the plan for them, but they got the plan for them. The plan for them was to throw their asses in front of a wood chipper called the Russian military and be done with it. They were probably happy, to tell you the truth. They probably looked at them and said, they were very useful when they were very useful, but they ain't very useful anymore. And they'll be a pain in the ass when we win, because they thought they were going to win. So what do? I got an idea. Let's put them out on front lines, and we'll get out of the way, and we'll tell them, hey, you dumb fucks. Our dear friends, why don't you take your bullets and rub them in lard? Boy, that'll really piss off the Chechens. And so they rub their bullets in lard, and they put it up on YouTube, and they're like, ha ha ha. And the Chechens are like, yeah, you sons of bitches, where do we get our hands on you? Wasn't it, just say this, didn't exactly work out like they planned. Okay, so those Nazis notwithstanding, and then the Russians caught them and put them in a this is hilarious. The Russians caught them and put them in like a prison in the Donetsk, and the Ukrainians literally targeted the Azov people and blasted them themselves. Like the Russians were like, hey, we're humane. We don't want to kill them. We don't like Nazis, but right now we'll bag them up in this big building, and we'll keep an eye on them. And the Ukrainians are like, yeah, let's see the coordinates on that building. South and 344 blah 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 north. We'll just plug it into our HIMARS here. Boom. They always wanted to get rid of the Nazis. So once the Russians didn't get rid of the Nazis, they were accidentally, something that has like a pinpoint targeting mechanism, they accidentally didn't realize they were targeting their own Azov people, and they blew the hell out of them. Yeah. And then they fixed it, though. They did it again. If you're in the Azov, what's funny? So these Azov people get trained, and we traded, right? And we find out that the Azov people that got traded, they're going to Turkey, and they're going to stay there till the end of the war, and then they get to go back to Ukraine. And everybody's like, yeah, that's a weird deal, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, that's probably a deal the Azov people made. Let's face it. You get captured. Your own country tries to blow you to hell. You come out of there with like an arm hanging off, one eye's gone, what have you, right? You get blown up. You get back, you get yourself together, and you're like, well, they accidentally blew us up once. That couldn't happen again. Boom, they blow you to hell again. Right now, you got your other foot hanging off, your hair's burned off. You're like, man, this ain't good. So then there's like, hey, good news. There's a deal. What's the deal? You're going back to Ukraine. And the Azov guys are like, Ukraine, huh? I hear Turkey's great this time of year. They got great beaches. I got an idea. Why don't we bargain this thing a little bit differently? Yeah, Ukraine's nice, but it's getting a little chilly, and Ukraine's not the best place to be. Why don't we just go to Turkey? We'll chill out there until this government's gone. Guarantee look, the Nazis are rooting for literally, they're in Turkey rooting for the Russians. They're like, we're in Turkey. You hate the orcs? I hate them. But before I go back to Ukraine, them bastards are going to win, because if I go back, my own people are going to kill me because you know too much. They're afraid you're going to talk. So, in the mafia, I used to teach. One of the things I taught in college was criminal justice, and I taught organized crime. And let me tell you something about organized crime. If you're in the mafia, the worst thing you can do is know too much. If you know too much, snitches get stitches and end up in ditches, right? You don't have to snitch. They'll just say, well, he knows too much. And in theory, if they caught him, he could talk. He's a weak link. Let's take him for a ride in the country. A nice ride in the country. So the bottom line is, the Azov people started thinking that now that they've been captured, they've been shot and blown to hell once by their own people. They've been shot and blown to hell twice by their own people. So they're probably thinking, geez, we're better off with the Ruskies. And they're like, hey, good news, you can go home. I don't want to go home. Can we go to Turkey? So the Azov people are in Turkey, and I suspect people are like, hey, I bet they want to go back to Ukraine. I'm like, yeah, I kind of got a feeling they don't want to go back to Ukraine. The things they know too much. They could talk. And the Ukrainians wanted to get rid of them anyway. I mean, the U.S. empire who runs Ukraine, they have served their purpose, their usefulness. They're done with them. Look, people are pointing at them. Hey, look at those Azov Nazis. They got shit on their patch. Looks like a bunch of Nazis, for God's sake. Look at that. They got swastikas all over the place. And the U.S. State Department's like, oh, man, this is getting to be a problem. You know how these Dayton, Sullivan, and Newland are. These Nazis are getting to be a problem. Yeah. And you know what we do with problems. And everybody's like, yeah, you got to neutralize a problem. Yeah, we might have to neutralize this problem. Target them up with the HIMARS. So I'm just saying, Turkey, wherever you hide these people, you might want to put an anti-aircraft system, because I don't know how far it is from Turkey to Ukraine, a long time, but it's possible that the Ukrainians, a long ways, it's possible that as the Ukrainians ask for long distance missiles, the US, we need some long distance missiles, some with targeting. Really? How far would you like those missiles to go? Well, how far is it to Turkey where the Azov battalion is? That's about 650 miles. Yeah, that ought to do it. 651. Just in case we need an extra mile. Yeah, so that's it. The Azov people have served their purposes, and now they're out. They're done. They're finished. If they go back to Ukraine, I just don't think things are going to work out well for them, and I think they recognize that. All right, so let's continue. So how does this end? I know that's what you want to hear. How do we get to where it ends? Well, I think that everything I said leads me to one conclusion, and that is that the U.S. plan was a non-military plan. They understand, and the people who pay their checks. Remember something, Joe Biden's a puppet. Remember, we're talking a lot of puppets. These people don't have power. They're being told what to do by very wealthy people, right? And their plan, the people behind them don't want to die. The people behind them are like, what do they want? They want transhumanism. They're so rich. They're so privileged. What they really would like is to be able to put their bodies and their consciousness in some kind of computer. You know what I'm talking about. They'd like to put their consciousness in a computer until such time as human beings have the technology to rebuild, to build some kind of a genetic android, and then they can take it out and put it in the android, and boom, they can live forever and be rich forever. That is their plan. Right? So they don't want to die in a nuclear holocaust. That ain't their plan. No part of their plan. Since that ain't their plan, it ain't Joe Biden's plan. Think about people like Joe Biden, Newland. They are not the power brokers. They are not the people in charge, right? They are the people that are working for the people in charge. Although the neocons have an ideology of their own and they're a bit dangerous, but let's go on, because we're getting to where this ends. Since I believe that the people in charge don't want to die in a nuclear holocaust, the pressure is going to be on the neocons to say, look, don't turn this into war. Remember, recently, every now and then you'll get Burrell, you'll get Schultz, you'll get Stoltenberg. When things get really dicey, they'll say, we don't want to go to war with Russia. You'll see that. NATO doesn't want to go. No, we don't want to go to war with Russia. Well, there's a couple of reasons. Not the least of which being, they literally do not have the military capacity at this point to go toe to toe with Russia and Europe. They have allowed their military power to atrophy. They don't have it there. And the US empire is spread too thin. They got all this stuff in the Middle East. They got all this stuff in South America, all this stuff. And, if the US and Russia's militaries are roughly the same size, but Russia's are concentrated, and particularly concentrated to protect their eastern border. The U.S. since it's trying to rule the world, it has to have theirs spread all over the place, which means they're bigger than the Russian military, not a lot bigger, but bigger, but they're spread a lot more thin. So they don't have the focused, concentrated resources in Europe to go toe to toe with Russia. So they're not going to do. What are they? People are like, well, maybe the Americans will send in troops. Well, if they send in troops, and they don't have the horsepower to protect them, their troops will get wiped out. Then what happens? Then they got to attack, and then they got to get, they're going to lose some resources that they are not accustomed to losing. Things are going to go. They know if they go toe to toe with Russia in Europe, they're going to kind of lose quick, because Russia just has too much power. You don't want to go to war with a superpower, with any superpower on its own border. Right now, the U.S. doesn't want to go toe-to-toe with Iran on Iran's border, in Iran's area, because Iran's just loaded to the hilt with ballistic missiles. And the U.S. knows we go toe-to-toe with Iran in Tehran's neighborhood, those ballistic missiles are going to come flying. Oh, can we nuke them, or can we do things? Yeah, but what good does it do now? Now nuclear stuff is flying all over the place. Now we got a big problem. And those, like I said, you're going to take some nasty ballistic missile. I mean, they flatten all your bases around. Who knows what Iran? They don't know what. And then Iran's got its proxies around. They don't know how many missiles they have, what they can do. They can devastate Israel. This could be nasty. Not to mention, I had one other thing just to say. If Iran closes down the Straits of Hormuz, how does Qatar get their gas and oil out? How does the UAE get their gas and oil out of the Red Sea? How does Saudi Arabia? See what I mean? The oil speculators go crazy. The derivatives markets crash. So to go to toe with Iran is not as easy as people think it is. It would be devastating. Okay. So they're looking at Russia and they're saying, look, if they don't want to fight Iran, sure as hell. I was told by competent sources that when the Iranians shot down that drone when Trump was in power, and there was a discussion that the story about Trump stopping the 10 minutes before the attack was bullshit. That what really happened was that the Pentagon people said to Trump, if you attacked Iran, here's what could happen. They could unleash their missiles and flatten every base and kill every soldier on every base in the, they can sink aircraft carriers. They can do you really want to do this? They can close the Straits of Hormuz, devastate our economy. Is it worth it over one unmanned drone? And Trump said, nah, it really ain't. So they cooked up this bullshit story about Trump saying stop at the last 10 minutes to hide the fact that the cost was far too high to do that. So if the cost is high for that, for Russia, you know what the cost is. I mean, for Europe, for Iran, the cost is far too high for Russia. So I don't believe could they stumble into war with Russia? In theory, yes. Do they want to? Absolutely not. So what does that mean? Here's what it really means. And look at Syria. What happened? They were determined that Russia was not going to stop them in Syria. It wasn't going to happen. Syria was too important, because that would mean that Russia literally stopped the U.S. as a regime change. What happened? The U.S. has been stopped. The regime change stuff is done. They've had elections. The Syrians are back there. Now Assad is starting to meet with other people. There's other countries. They're starting to befriend other people again. They're getting back with the Arab League, blah, 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 blah. The U.S. lost. The only thing the U.S. is stuck. They got a bunch of people in the Syrian oil fields embarrassing themselves, stealing Syrian oil. But as far as taking the independence, because what they wanted was not the oil. They wanted to take the independence from Syria so they could control that country. Then they'd have the oil and everything else, right? They didn't do that. They didn't accomplish their goal. Syria is still independent. Syria is still a friend to its allies. And Iran, Russia, Hezbollah, etc., still have a presence in Syria. So they lost that one. It didn't work. Here's my projection. That's what's going to happen in Ukraine. This is nothing but what? It is a regime change operation. You will see another flawed regime change operation. The difference being the stakes are so much higher here that the problems that happen as a result of this attempted regime change operation, sorry about that, people should always remember to turn their phones off before they go on the air. So okay, so what's going to happen is this, and these people are idiots and not very bright, so they're not going to be able to do it. They're not going to be able to do anything to make a difference to fix it. So what's going to happen here? My projection. Number one, the timing is so perfect. The Russians are mobilizing, right? The Russians are preparing to up the ante militarily. They're getting ready to really bring the heat militarily, right? And all these timing things are happening at the same time. The Ukrainians, at the behest and the orders of the U.S. military, the U.S. Neocons, put together all their people for a last gasp attack. And they attack, all along the contact line, like 1,000-kilometer contact line. They attack everywhere. They take heavy losses. They lose a lot. They really take a beating. They get what they got. Here's what they got. They got some PR. And they said, hey, we took some towns here and there. But what happened? Yes, they were able to get some public relations wins, but they lost a lot of reserve troops. They lost a lot of equipment, and they're still losing a lot of troops and a lot of equipment because there's a lot of fighting around Liman. There's still a lot of fighting going on. They're losing a lot of troops. They're losing a lot. At the same time, the Russians are really building up. Right. So they're losing a lot of material. They're losing a lot of reserves. They're losing a lot. And the Russians are just starting to wake up and build. They're like, okay, let's build this monster and go get them. I don't think. Here's what people think. It'll take the Russians about 3 months. They'll put this thing together in 3 months, and then they'll launch an attack. They'll launch a counteroffensive, blah, blah, blah. I don't think that. I think the Russians have already made it a point. What have they said? Well, we blew up some of your electric stations and stuff, but that was just an elbow. We just hitting you with some elbows. We're just waking you up a little bit, saying, "Don't screw with us. Don't piss us off." So while some people think they're going to wait, they're going to get all these people together. They're going to take a lot of troops, move them into Ukraine, some of their seasoned best troops, move them into Ukraine and fight. And of course, they're going to replace them with these people. I think that as soon as the referendums start, they're going to be ready, that they're going to be ready to launch some attacks, that they're going to really up the ante with standoff weapons, right? With aerospace, aircraft attacks. The Air Force is, people have been saying, where's the Russian Air Force? Where's the Russian Air Force? I think after the referendums, you're going to find out where the Russian Air Force has been, that they're going to really engage the Russian Air Force, that they're really going to start saying, okay, we know where stuff is. We're going to pinpoint areas. And like I said, there'll be some carpet bombing of areas. Troops are in that area. Ain't nothing going to be left in that area bigger than a quarter. So I think what you'll see in the immediacy after the referendums, and of course, probably during or prior, right now, the West, the U.S. is, through the Ukrainian troops, are going to try to disrupt and make some attacks, things of that nature. But I think that the Russia is planning, as soon as these things are done, the referendums are done, and this stuff goes through the Russian Duma, and they vote, and okay, now as of 12 midnight on October the 1st, whatever the hell date, that's part of Russia. That's where they're going to be. Now, you let one missile, you let one piece of artillery fly across that border. Yeah, and when it does, they're going to send a message. They're going to make it clear now. They're going to bomb the living hell. There will be aerospace and missile attacks on Ukraine like there's no tomorrow. They're going to say, okay, this thing really has been, they haven't seen the military power of a superpower visited upon them. They've seen a special military operation, they've seen an expeditionary force, but they haven't seen the full power of a superpower military visited upon the fields and villages of Ukraine. I suspect that when that decision is made, and when the Duma says, okay, it's October 1st at midnight, it will be anything you don't let something come flying across our border on October 1st at 12:01 a.m. If so, there will be an immediate an overwhelming attack utilizing standoff weapons, missiles, things like that. It'll be an opening salvo that's what I expect. I expect an opening salvo that says this ain't a game no more. And who knows what they're going to hit. It could be that they've said to the West, look, we know you got places where Westerners are here. We know you've got command, because Shoigu said it. We know there's command centers. We know where they are. We know there's in Kiev. We know you got a bunch of satellites there. Could they target the satellites and say those satellites are being used to attack our country? They're gone. Could they shoot U.S. satellites down? It's possible. Could they say, look, in theory, I don't think this is going to happen in the immediacy, but they could say you're staging this stuff in Poland. Either that stops or we'll stop it. Theoretically, but I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're going to say this is Ukraine, and then now they're going to say, well, you're bringing that stuff in here. There ain't going to be no bridges for you to get it across. There's not going to be trains. There's not going to be power. That they're going to let the dogs loose, and I suspect at first it will be via standoff weapons, via air attacks. That's what I see coming first. But they're going to be of a superpower level. So far, they've been of an expeditionary force level. They're going to be of a superpower level. And it's going to be a message to the West. Oh, shit. You know what I mean? This little bit of weapons and stuff that you're sending to Ukraine worked when it was an expeditionary force. Not worked, they didn't win, but it held them up for a while. Now, that dog don't hunt no more. The only thing Ukrainians are going to be able to do is dig a hole and hide in it, and that ain't going to help them. So I suspect that's what I would see first. Now, as we get towards the end, the other thing I think you see is this. Timing. We're getting into cold weather, and the Russians know time's on their side. So the other thing you're going to see is you're going to see the devastating economic fall of Europe. What does that mean? That means now, and regime changes are starting. You got Hungary who's pushing back. You got Sweden who's got a right wing. Now, Sweden, Italy, I don't know the right wing people, but they're still kind of Atlanticist, and they'll still maybe, we'll go along. But I don't know how long. I don't know how long they'll go along with that stuff when things start really falling apart for them, because they've got two problems. But at any rate, let me continue. So the U.S. then is going to have to start going to its European allies saying, hold tight, hold tight. Please hold the line. No matter what you have to go through. Because remember, this is the game plan for the United States to Europe. I don't care what you have to go through, no matter how much pain, no matter how many people starve and freeze and die, you got to do what I tell you to do. You got to hold on. I don't care if you're in whole continents gets wiped out. If you lose 80% of the people, it doesn't matter to me. The important thing is that you stay. Because why? They got a tiger by the tail. Ukraine, in controlling Ukraine in this war, they can't let go. If they let go, the Russians stomp it. And what do they say to these people that went through all of this for their plan and they told them it would work? So they can't let go of the tiger. If they hold on to the tiger, what's going to happen? The commodities market's going crazy. And then you're going to have civil and social unrest in Europe, and Europe's going to collapse economically. And if it collapses economically, it'll take some of the U.S. with it. There's markets there. The U.S. is selling a lot of stuff to Europe, buying a lot of stuff from Europe. What happens if the European markets collapse? They're going to take China, big market, U.S. big market. One of the biggest world markets collapses. Boom. It ain't going to work out well for any of us if that happens, especially the market that's collapsing. So the U.S. is going to try to hold on to them and say, go ahead and let your market collapse, because they can't let go. They can't hold on. They're in a catch-22 situation. They definitely can't say, okay, guys, let's talk with Russia. They can never do that. But they'll be in a position where they can't say, let's not talk with Russia, continue with no gas. So eventually what's going to happen is the pressure, the European leaders will be caught. They'll be caught between being vassals of the U.S. and having their bosses tell them, you can't give up. You can't stop. You have to let your economy collapse. They're going to be caught between their people saying, we'll string your ass up if you let the economy collapse. At some point, it could get to a point where if those European leaders side with the United States, then the unrest could get to a point where they could physically be in danger, where they could see such a collapse that they understand they're not going to have what's the good of ruling over a country if there ain't no country there, right? We saw some of the things that happened with the yellow vest, and they still had a heat, and they still had food, and they were like tearing that place to shreds. Then they're going to have to deal with all this business. So, we're going to build we're going to take out a loan, right? And we're going to help people with gas and help people with electricity. Here's the problem. If I take out a loan, that means I'm expecting to be able to pay it. That means in the future, I have to believe that at some point, let's say I'm out of work. I got to believe that I'm going to get a job eventually. So I take out a loan to make it. I start looking for a job because I need a way to replenish those funds at the level that I was making before. If I'm making $150,000 a year, I got to go out and I look at my bills are based on 150,000. I'm going to try to replace that level of income. I can't go in at $10,000 a year and now live the same way I did before. So what is Europe going to do? We're going to take a loan. Okay, you're going to take a loan. Yes, and then we're going to give people blah 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 blah. Okay, you're going to give people money, help with electricity or gas. Yeah, and then what are you going to do? So you're going to do all that just so you can hold on right now. And now your steel industry, what's going to happen in Germany? Oh, that's going to collapse. Aluminum, the good history. Car industry, done. How about BASF and your gigantic chemical industry? Out the door, right? So you're going to allow your industry to collapse and take a loan, which means you'll never be able to pay that loan. All you're saying is this: we are one of the most wealthy and powerful per capita industrial powers in the world. We're going to turn ourselves into an impoverished hellhole. And at that point, the people who gave us back to the loan are going to say, we want you to pay the loan, and you ain't going to be able to do it. And you know what they'll do? The same thing they do to the impoverished hellholes that they create all over the world. They'll say, well, we'll take number one, we'll take all your infrastructure. And number two, you're going to have to force austerity on your people. And then you're going to have to pay us anyway. And now you can go to the poorest country in the world and, where it's Africa or Yemen or somewhere in South America, you find yourself a poor country, or you're going to go to Europe, and it's going to be the same thing. They're going to change themselves from an industrial power to an impoverished hellhole country. That's what's going to happen. And as an impoverished hellhole country, they're going to have loans to everywhere that they can't afford to pay. And they're going to have a bunch of people sitting there looking at their leaders saying, you sons of bitches, I can't believe you did this to us. And wait a minute. And the Russians won anyway. All this, and the Russians are going to win anyway. Meanwhile, let me add this. What did the Russians get out of it? Based on what I've seen, it looks to me like the Russians are going to get the Black Sea. Eventually, they're taking Odessa. They're going to have the Black Sea. So they're going to have all of these seaports. They're going to have the areas of industry, right? The big steel mills and things like that. They're going to have those. All this industry and they're going to have a huge area that grows wheat and all these other things. They'll have whatever they want. So Ukraine can be a very productive country economically. It really has the ability. It has a tremendous area for agriculture, right? And it has all kinds of mines and stuff like that. So as Europe turns into a godforsaken dystopian hellscape, Russia is going to actually increase its access to commodities, to wheat and foods, to stuffs and things like that. So Russia is going to get stronger as Europe turns into nothingness. And the U.S., I don't believe, is going to have any intent on going to war with Russia because they know they don't have the ability to do that right now. Like I said, it could get stumbled into it. Yeah. Now, meanwhile, if you've got China who's in the mix, who's backing and supporting Russia, if I can figure this out and you can figure this out, then the leaders of Russia and China can figure this out. So what the U.S. is trying to do is draw Russia and China. They want to draw China now into attacking Taiwan so that they can try the same trick. Hey, they attacked Taiwan, Europe. We got to sanction them. Well, what the hell's Europe got left? Hey, what do we get from China? Well, that's where we get our food and the few basic things that keep us alive. Let's get rid of them too. What the hell? We don't have any energy anymore anyway. Think about this. How do you process food without energy? How does Europe without energy from Russia, how do they do frozen foods? How do they have their meat processing plants and seafood processing plants and all? How do they do any of that without Russian energy? They don't. So within the next few months, as they fall, and two things are going to happen simultaneously. That is, the Europeans are going to, their economy is going to totally collapse. It's going to be in free fall, in total collapse. It already is. And the Russians are going to be not turning the tables because they've been winning all along. They just, they've had an area where the Ukrainians moved into some areas that the Russians didn't have enough people and they evacuated. And then the Ukrainians interpreted that to say, hey, we had some great wins. We had big wins, blah, 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 right? But when the Russians now make their move, you're going to have a confluence of events. Number one, the situation's turning really, 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 really bad for Ukraine and the West. And it's going to get to the point now. Let me add this: as the Russians pick up their aerospace attacks, right? That means the more tanks and things you send in there, the quicker they're going to get blown up. And they're not going to have bridges. They're not going to have electricity. How do you do the things you need to do? And meanwhile, the U.S. and Germany, and right now we know the U.S. and and Europe are literally running out of stuff. So basically, they're being demilitarized. They're like, hey, let's send a bunch of tanks. They send a bunch of tanks, the Russians blow them up. The Russians are almost sitting there like, more tanks, please. Hey, yeah, send another dozen tanks. We got room. We got these missiles here just waiting to blow up some tanks. And we don't have any tanks to blow up. Could you send another 100? Poland? Yeah, there we go. We're sending, and you'll see it on TV. The Poles are sending another 100 tanks to the Ukrainians to stop the Russians. They send 100 tanks. They go out on the field. Boom, they're all blown up. The Russians call, hey, those are gone. Another 100, please. Almost like you're ordering food. Hey, we're done with the first 100 tanks, Poland. If you could send us another 100 to blow up, that would be nice. Hey, look, we can probably get these a little bit faster. Could you send us 150 this time? We'll knock those out in a couple days. We don't want to get too far ahead of you. We know it's difficult for you to, running short of tanks. We're going to give you time to muster your tanks. We're sitting here watching, literally looking at the places where you're bringing the tanks together in Poland. Thank you very much. Certainly appreciate it. Once you get them all together, if you could, in a nice orderly fashion, bring them out to the battlefield and we'll blow the living hell out of them. And then you can send the next batch. It's almost like they got an agreement. Send us a batch of military stuff. We'll blow it up and just send us another batch. Because, hey, if you're demilitarizing Ukraine, you might as well demilitarizing all the NATO. You're demilitarizing the U.S., Germany, whatever, right? And I think some people might have figured it out because now they're giving them like tanks from the 1820s or something. They're like horse-drawn. Have you seen some of the stuff? Hey, we've got some T-55 tanks from the 1950s. There's like horses pulling them out. They're like Fred Flintstone. There's like a hole in the bottom. Their feet go down to the ground and they're running along with the tanks. I'm like, yeah, I got a funny feeling those tanks aren't going to turn the tide, my friends. They ain't going to win the battle with prehistoric tanks. Like, what are they? It's got to the point where they're going to literally go into museums. Hey, we got a bunch of tanks in the museums. Do they run? Well, by run, if you mean they can be pulled by maybe a car or a four-wheel drive or something. Okay, good enough. Give them to the Ukrainians. What the hell? All they're going to do, and they know it, is stick a bunch of Ukrainian schmucks in there, stick them out onto the battlefield so they can catch another missile. That's their job. They're almost like a receiver in football. They might as well stand on the tank with their arms out like this. All right, what direction is that missile coming from? I think I'll catch it, because your job, if you're a Ukrainian soldier, is to catch missiles, is to catch bullets, is to catch lead. And apparently, unfortunately for the Ukrainian soldiers, they're getting much better at it these days. So we're going to get ancient, before you know it, it'll be like they'll find like catapults from, like, they'll go to Italy and some old Roman site where the Romans were fighting. They're like, you got anything for the Ukrainians? Well, we got this old catapult that they used to use 2,500 years ago. What the hell? Stick a big rock on it, give it to the Ukrainians. It goes to the battlefield. Boom, the Russians blow it up, and the plot continues. So that's where we are. So bottom line is this: at some point, reality always smashes through, my friend. So all this goes on and continues this downward spiral until such time, just like in Syria, that we're kind of there in Syria. That's just like all the other regime change. The regime change operations are now absurd, preposterous, and laughable at times, if it wasn't for all of the people who are dying and losing their lives, And so what happens in the end? This regime change operation falls. That is the end. That at some point, the Russians overwhelmingly, really are going to overwhelmingly crush the Ukrainians to the point where it can't be denied, to a point where Ukraine does not exist as a country. They might just blow the hell out of the, their political leadership and military leadership and everywhere. And at some point, there's collapse. At some point, there's going to be Ukrainian collapse where there's nothing there and the Russians can do and go wherever they want to, and the military is not going to be able to be resupplied. So at some point, the military is going to be overwhelmed. Politically, they're going to be overwhelmed and they'll collapse. And it'll be like Baghdad Bob, wherein, somebody will be standing at what's his name? Zelensky will be standing at the gates of Kiev, and there'll be like Russian tanks going behind him, and he'll be saying, "We will roast their fires of their we'll have fires and roast their bellies at the gates of Kiev." And there'll be like Russian soldiers walking behind him, like putting their hands behind him like rabbit ears, waving to the dancing and stuff like that, doing the Russian Cossacks dance with their hands crossed, going down and up and kicking all around him. And he'll be standing there saying, "No, the Ruskies are going to be stopped. I hate them, and they'll never get to the gates of Kiev, and our troops are," that's what we're going to end up with. Some preposterous absurdity where everybody in the world's looking, saying, "Man, this thing's kind of went bad, hasn't it?" And at that point, that's it for the U.S. empire. That's it. That's it. The bully has went up against one of the kids. He smacked the kid down here and took his lunch. He smacked the kid down here and took his lunch. And then he got to a kid that was his own size. And he said, "I'm going to kick your ass too." And the kid said, "I don't want no trouble, but I'll fight you if I have to." He grabbed that kid, and that kid bloodied his nose. And the bully's out of luck. Not saying the bully's going to give up. I mean, if I know the neocons, they'll be like, "Oh crap, that didn't work. What didn't work? What do you think?" Taiwan. The problem they're going to have. Here's the problem they're going to have. The real problem they're going to have is that they're going to lose their coalition. They're weakening themselves. Look. If I got an empire, I got to have all of my colonies and stuff, don't I? I got to have everybody around me. I got to have a foundation of colonies around the world. What's going to happen when Europe falls? When European economy collapses and they look at the U.S. and they say, "Bail us out," and the U.S. economy is in free fall too, and the U.S. can't bail them out, and the U.S. wouldn't bail them out if they could, because they meant to collapse their economy. At that point, the vassals, see, what happens is this, and Putin was very prophetic when he said that, when he said there will be a different set of elites. What's going to happen is that the elite ruling class, there's been a cultural collapse in the West. A complete cultural collapse, but not the culture of the countries. The culture of the ruling elite class is in collapse and free fall. So the people at some point will realize, okay, these people got to go, and there will be a different set of cultural elites. That's what I think happens. You're going to get a replacement of cultural elites. And then we'll go from there. The Russians will never trust them. Even the new ones may come and say, "Hey, Russia, can we make a deal?" Now, what Russia may do is say, "We'll sell you some gas at market price," and that's about it. But we won't give you a contract. You're going to have to buy it day to day. So the days of the model for Europe, and Russians will know this. If I, now you've already done everything you done and said you hated me. If I allow this model to reoccur, and you become economically powerful again, you bastards are going to do the same thing. As soon as you get power, you'll be like, "Oh, by the way, I just remembered, we hate the Russians." So the Russians are going to be like, "We ain't going down there. We'll give you enough that we make plenty of money, but you ain't going to have a model where you can get powerful again. We'll give you enough that you can survive, just enough gas to survive, and you're going to pay market prices for it. But you're not going to build up this gigantic machine again, because we already know what you'll do." Nope. So the days of Europe being an industrial power based on cheap energy is done. Russia's going to move on. China, same way. They're going to move forward. And they're working on rebuilding. They're working on building up the economic markets in other parts of the world. The Africans, the South Americans, the Middle Easterners, the rest of the world, the Asian. They're going to build up markets in the other world so they have their own markets. They can do business, things of that nature. And Turkey's smart. Turkey's not that sees it going. Turkey's like, "Yeah, I see the way this is going. I think I'll hang out with the Ruskies and the Chinese here. And, we're in the long term, we'll make money." They understand. So that's the end game, I think. Garland says, yes, Garland Nixon, how does this end? It ends with the economic collapse of the Europeans, the slight revitalization of the European markets because they get a new set of elites who are willing to bargain with Russia and China enough for survival, but they're not going to be able to rebuild and regain their economic system that they have now that works so well. The U.S. is there's going to be some regime change stuff going on here too. There's going to be very, very serious political problems here because of the failure of the failure of the government to address the problems of the people, the total failure of the government to address the people because of the national security states takeover of so much power in the U.S. and the fact that it's not a rational organization, that it's just a power-hungry bunch of fruitcakes, and they're not going to know how to deal with the fact that people are going to say, we're going to put some other people in power. There's going to be a crisis of democracy in that the people are going to say, we want something different. And they're going to start voting for other people. And the machine is not going to know how to handle it. So you're going to have inner turmoil here, the big war, and you're already starting to see it. Because the big thing is on the outside, the commies, we got to fight the commies in South America. We got to fight the Ruskies. We got to fight the Chinese. We got to fight the Iranians. We got to fight on and on and on out there, right? But meanwhile, they're starting to say, but the problem is at home. These people at home are dissidents pushing back. Oh, they're Russian bots or whatever, right? That's going to grow. So the power here is going to have a much bigger problem at home. It's going to have a much bigger war against its own people, against dissidents as dissent grows, as pushback grows. It's going to have to, we've only got, let's say we've got 100% of our energy. If you can put 99% of your energy on fighting your external foes and 1% on fighting your internal foes, but you can give your hell to your external foes. But what happens when your internal stability grows to a point where you got to put 80% of yours energy in addressing the internal dissent? That's what they're going to be growing, and that's what's going to happen to Europe. It's going to be 100%. The only thing that's going to matter is internal dissent, and that's what takes an empire down, is internal dissent. And that's the big war coming. That's the whole thing about the Biden administration coming up with these things about domestic terrorists, because they know that the internal dissent is going to rise, but they don't know how to deal with it. They're just incompetent beyond belief. At any rate, so that's it. Garland Nixon, thanks a lot. Let me start here. I got some super chats. Let's look at the super chats. And Klaus Vatny says, we talk about the elites, the WEF globalists, Wall Street being behind it all. But I wish we knew more about who's really calling the shots. Any ideas? So let me say this too. There's something, Klaus, that's very important. There's a discussion that's had. How much of what they're doing is planned because they're brilliant playing 3D chess? How much of it is sheer incompetence? When the closer you get, and I have been in some areas near the halls of power, the closer you get to the halls of power, the more you start to feel its incompetence, more so than these brilliant people who are 3D chess players. It seems more incompetence. So that's why they don't have a plan. There's a level of incompetence. So the elites, WEF, globalists, Wall Street being behind it all. The other part of it is what's behind it all to some extent is greed and incompetence. So that's a good question. I'm not saying they don't know anything that they're doing and there's no plans, but don't underestimate the level of incompetence. Never underestimate the level of incompetence. I'm thanking some people with super chats. Anybody who can, I certainly appreciate it. Let's go to some more questions. Garland, how can the American people accept that the U.S. spends year after year $700 billion USD in defense, while according to U.S. media, their children go to dilapidated schools? Well, because they're propaganda. American people are being propagandized into, what do they look at the Democratic Party? Hey, what's happening? Trump! They don't even know anything. They've been taught that if something happens to Trump, then they win. They don't even know what they win. Meanwhile, you got the Republicans, same thing, two brainwashed cults running around waiting for their party to save them. Oh boy, if only the right Republicans get in, then we'll fix this thing. Meanwhile, the Democrats, we got to stop Trump. So they're all a couple of brainwashed cults, and they're basically doing what they're told to do. But the pain's going to get heavier. So the pain index is going to wake them up. That's what I think. The pain index will wake them up. Let's keep going. Are there any more super chats? Yes, there are. Yes, there are. Let's see what. It will be time to storm the Bastille. Here. Let's see here. Super sticker. Thank you, Jason Houston. Anybody else? There's some. Thank everybody for the super chats. I really appreciate those who help to support the channel. Greatly appreciated. General Meow Meow. What a great handle. The sixth extinction won't be nuclear, natural, even biblical. It's happening now, and it's spurred on by a lack of common sense and critical thinking. Stay classy. It makes sense to me. I know there's a sixth extinction stuff going on, and you can find that out. The ruling elites are in denial. Absolutely. That, and doesn't that get back into what I'm saying? Are they brilliant 3D chess players or are they incompetent boobs? Well, look at Biden. What do you think? Say he's wandering around looking for somebody to shake hands. He's like, oh, where do I go? Who's what? Huh? And they're like, yeah, that's our leader, Joe Biden. Didn't you say we're in Ukraine to weaken Europe? Yes, 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 yes. Not one thing only, because part of it is so we can take down Europe. They got three adversaries. They got three potential economic adversaries: Russia, China, and the EU. They're only taking out. They're only getting one of them, but they're trying to get all three of them. So they'll take whichever one they can. So yeah, that's part of it. Motives can be determined by results. True, it's the imperialist playbook. Am I right? Well, motives can be determined by results. I'll put it like this. If you take a Zen perspective, there's a Zen flavor to that. In other words, the reality is based on what happens. And so here's what I would say. Let's go a different way. Whatever the results are, it doesn't matter what the motives are. The motives ain't going to change the results. You can do something with the intent to get an outcome. That's the outcome you're going to get. Based on what you do will produce a specific outcome. I don't give a damn what your intents are. So therefore, I'm not big on motives, because motives are irrelevant. You know what? I think that if I wave my hands in the air, somebody will walk up and hand me $1 million. My motive is to get $1 million. The action I'm taking is waving my hands in the air. I don't care how much you wave your hands. Somebody ain't walking up with $1 million. So I'm not as much into motives. Waving my hand will give me a tired arm. That's all I'm getting, a tired arm eventually, right? So motives, and I'm not big on those. All right, let's keep going. We got somebody super chat. Next. Congratulations, you were hitting the rand. Now, Alexander and the Atlas guy are quoting you. Wow, not the Atlas guy. I love the Atlas guy. Brian Berlichetic? I don't know. That's the only thing I hate about the Atlas guy. I always forget how to pronounce his name. But anyway, he's awesome. I love it. Wow, those guys. You know what the best part about being on Durand was? Really, really the best part? It was when Alex Christoforou said, this was it. I could have left at that point. He goes, Garland, I was watching one of your videos out the other day, and I thought, time out. I can leave now. Alex Christo, my very favorite YouTube show. And one of the guys that did it said he was watching my program. At that point, I'm like, I'm here, man. I can die. I have reached the pinnacle of YouTubian growth in that Alex Christoforou is like watching my show. So at this point, I can just chill. I can just close it all down. There's no reason. I mean, how much further can you go when the guys on the Durand are watching your show? There's nowhere to go but down. So it kind of scared me because I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to crash because I've hit my ascendancy has stopped. So that was great. That was my favorite part because those guys are great. Oh man, let's see what we got next. It looks like another one. This is fun. Sparky says, Garland, terrific work on the Durand. Thanks. It's been great lately. I was on the Durand. Then I was on, I don't know if you saw it. I was on Galloway's show, and like they lost the feed. And I'm sitting there talking to Galloway, and I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, who the hell's George Galloway? And they're like, Garland, we lost the feed. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll just keep going. So I'm like, yeah, blah, 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 blah. And finally they come on and they're in my ear again. And they're like, we're going to go to let's just go to a break. And so I talked for a second, and I was just like, okay, you're the mother of all talk shows, George Galloway, blah, 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 blah. And we're gone. And I'm like, wow. And I watched my video and I thought, man, I really did a shitty job. And then people like called me and said, hey, you were great on Galloway. And I'm like, I watched it. You know how it is. We're always the ones that are the most critical of ourselves. So I felt like I screwed it up only because I've done TV before. And in comparison, you know what I could do with link? I ought to put a link to like some actual, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put a link up to actual TV stuff that I did and let people look when I did my TV show. Yes, what I'm going to do. I'm going to put a link up of the, when I was doing the TV show that was in New York and when I was doing stuff like that, some actual stuff. So you can see when I was in Fox News, I was on all the shows in Fox News and all that. I felt like good work. This, I feel like I'm stumbling and bumbling like an idiot half the time, but I had fun. And from my perspective, what difference does it make if I made an idiot out of myself as long as I had fun? All right, let's continue. I think that's it. Let me go down to the bottom and we will see. And then we'll get over to, let's see if there's any more. Thank you very much for the super chats. I really appreciate the people that really help keep wow, there's a lot of people. Okay, so let's start going. Here's another one. And Zach Boyle says, hey, Dr. G, enjoyed your Durand visit, the lads cast. Yeah, in fact, the guys got back with me. I heard from the Duran guys, and they were like, "Hey, Garland, it worked out great, and we'll have to get you back on again." And I was all teeth. I was all grinning for all I was worth when the guys on the Duran said they want to get me back on again. So I'm looking forward to that. I'll let everybody know, but it was a lot of fun. You know what I found? Those guys are real deep thinkers. Alex Mercouris is really, really deep thinkers. And I found that when I got around Alex and when I got in a conversation with him, it inspired me to kind of go to that Alexander Mercouris level. You know what I mean? He's a very deep thinker. He's a very philosophical thinker, but he's also a very logical thinker. And I found that when I got with him, that he was like, really, of course, as he always does, saying all these brilliant things. And I just felt like it inspired me to kind of join in and to kind of get on that kind of level, that inspired level. And so it was just a great inspiration. Let's see. Super sticker from, wow, Sabarano, Brazil. We got more. And thanks a lot from CA. How about this? Harry Abil, which main Western country will break rank first? Do you I bet everybody's thinking the same thing. I think Germany. Because I think Germany is the one that takes the most pain. However, let's face it, Hungary, it's already started. They're already started. And the guys from Hungary said a while back, we're not the only ones. There's other people that are with us. They're just not saying it. Well, that's a hint. That was a message. You know what that was? That was a message to the U.S. empire. Now, let's not add this. Which one will break first? But there's already one that's broke. Turkey. Turkey is Turkey's the second largest land army in NATO, and Turkey has said, "To hell with this, man. We need Russians here to make money. We need Russian gas. Our economy is inextricably linked to Russia. We ain't doing it." So, which one will break first? It's already broke. Turkey's out. Turkey's done. Turkey is like, they'll go along with a little bit that the U.S. wants, but Turkey has sprung. So it's already started. And now, of course, I think Italy, some of the countries that have new governments. So as the winter, as I keep saying, as General Winter rides into town with his icy steed, he's going to take bring a lot with him. Anything else I missed? Let me look. Super chat. All right. Sadly, in the UK, our elite are defo incompetent. Truss and Starmer are useful puppets. Yeah, Liz Truss is about as bright as a wet match in a dark cave. Love the firewood gatherings and Chicken Patty. Yay, Chicken Patty, the philosophical leader of this channel, I might add. Oh, okay, we already got Klaus. All right, I think that may be it. Thanks everyone for the super chats. Let me keep going down, see if I missed any. They keep coming. Super sticker from Cuperton. Thanks a lot. There we go. Sobrano, we've got that. And what South America? I believe they own a lot of the state heads around here. Oh, yes, my God, yeah. But South America is going away. South America is moving away from the U.S. empire. They got big problems. Hey, Dr. G and George. Okay, I think that's it for. So let's go over. Certainly, I appreciate my friends over at Rockfin. And let's see what we got. Thanks a lot, Amfuno. He's got a tip. I think we got another tip. Okay, Jacob Griesmer says the tech bros are afraid the Navy SEALs they hire to guard their mansion bunkers would take them over if their money becomes worthless. NPR, National Pentagon Radio even mentions the WEF and Davos men in this clip. Millstar, great. And if you go on Rockfin, so I think is that it. Well, thanks a lot, everybody, on a Saturday afternoon here in Maryland. Let me say this. You can look in the show notes, certainly, and you can see what's scrolling across. If you can do buymeacoffee.com/GarlandNH. Cash App is down to the $ DC Radio Man. Of course, we've got I've got a Patreon. Anybody, if you can do $3, if you can do $1, if you can do $5, if you can do $100, whatever you can do a month on Patreon is a great help to keep the channel going. I appreciate all the super chats, super stickers, everything. PayPal is garlandin@gmail.com. Certainly appreciate that. Everybody, let me ask two things. In the words of Alex Christoforos, smash the like button, smash the like button, smash the like button. If you're watching it on Twitter, if you're watching it on YouTube, please go to my Rockfin channel, ROKFIN, rockfin.com/Garland Nixon. You got two options there. You can become just a regular old member. It's certainly free. You can see everything I do, or with one exception. You can become a premium member. That's $9.99 a month. I really appreciate that. It helps the channel. I really appreciate all the premium members on rockfin.com. But if you can't afford it, don't worry about it. Just become a member and enjoy everything. There's only one thing you'll miss. On Rockfin, the Rockfin creators, we do one premium show. We have to do at least one premium show per week. My premium show is every Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. And I do a state of the war and everything update with Scott Ritter. That's every Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. You can see everything on my channel. My premium show is my 1 hour a week, 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. on Wednesdays with Scott Ritter. That's my premium show. That's the one you have to have paid the $9.99 a month to see. Other than that, you see everything else. Also, that $9.99 a month would allow you to see anybody, all of the channels on Rockfin. The premium members, you could get to, any premium content on any channel, you get to see that. So it's worth it. And it really helps the channel. Well, son of a gun. I don't know what happened. Oh, let me tell you, this is the weirdest thing. If you're all still there, the weirdest thing happened. And that is my computer died and I plugged it in and it was gone and it came back on. So I don't even know. I don't even know if I'm still, I guess I'm still there. My computer crapped out and I looked and it was at 0%. And I'm like, oh crap, I didn't plug my computer in. So I plugged it back in. Hopefully everyone is still there. Things don't look so good on things don't look so good. I think that is the end of I think that is maybe the end on Rockfin. But whatever the case, hey, we got as much as we could. Thanks a lot, everybody. Certainly appreciate it. We did what we could. It may have come to an abrupt and unplanned ending. Yeah. I don't know what happened. Let's just hope that went through on Rockfin. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Certainly appreciate it. I guess there's a way of the universe telling me it's time to sign out. Peace. I am trying. This is weird. I think, yeah, it's all screwed up. It is all screwed up. I don't know. At any rate, so I guess I better jump out of here. Isn't that the weirdest thing? So at any rate, I don't know if this is all on Rockfin, but I think I saved this video. So if it's not, I'll upload it to Rockfin. Thanks a lot, everybody. Again, peace. I'm out.